That being said, this is a picture that I took on campus of a tree. I won't tell you where it's at because it'll probably blow down one of these days. When you have a plant that is in the pot with the circle around the, oh yeah, you like that guy? I saw this in the ground. I was like, that's totally that, whatever that guy's name is. I don't know what his name is, but so you can do everything right. This is subsurface irrigation. This is 3 inches of mulch. This is a perfect planting situation for this tree. The problem is that the roots are doing this. We can all see what's going to happen, right? I mean, this is going to continue to go this way. This is going to continue to go that way. They're going to run into each other. The tree is going to fail eventually. I mean, it may take 3 years. It may take 5 years. A good windstorm is going to push this tree this way, and it's just going to come down. Take the plant out of the pot. See what it looks like. See what it smells like. I'll get into that. So J roots are just as bad as these circly ones that kind of go around it. Roots are going to continue to grow the direction that they were in the pot. This is why when you take the plant out of the pot, you're actually going to break it up a little bit. If you see that you've got these big gnarly roots that kind of circle around it, that doesn't mean that you need to throw it away or take it back to the nursery, but you need to do something to loosen that up so you can actually break up these plants. They're tougher than you think. We do some pretty weird things to our plants when we put them into pots. One thing you can definitely do to most of these plants is you can cut it down the side. They call that scoring your plant. Before I plant anything, take the plant out of the pot. You see I'm used to always having my Felcos right there. Take your Felcos, you slice down 4 sides, you open up that root ball so that these roots that we're circling, you just cut those. And that means that the place where you cut those on this one side is going to continue to grow, and they're not going to keep growing in the direction that you planted them. They're not going to do this. This is the next tree over from that other plant picture that I took. So there's a pattern here that I was sort of noticing. Those are called J roots, and that's Jay-Z, my kids say. I just have to believe them. So both of these are from my nursery. One of them I bought in. And I noticed that it took a lot of water to keep these things from actually wilting every single day. And when I take the plants out of the pot, I go, oh, okay, that makes sense. When you look at your roots, when you look at the root system of the plant that you're wanting to buy, if you see mostly roots and you can kind of touch this plant and nothing falls out of it, that means it's completely root bound. This one here, if you run your finger along it, all of the kind of the soil, all this media that I put in there starts just falling away because it's not completely rooted into its pot. That one there, if it's a salvia, maybe it doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal that the salvia is as rooted in as it is because it's only going to be this tall and it's not going to like fall in your car if it blows over in a windstorm. But if this is a 50-foot tree, it's going to be a problem at some point. This smell that I talk about, you know that rotten egg smell, like when you know the smell. You dump out the water and that's been, it was in the rain for a few days and you get that smell. When you have water mold, that's water mold. That's this sulfuric compound. I can't remember what it's been too many years since I've been in school. But this sulfur smell that you have, this is a water mold that will match the smell of a root system that has Phytophthora or some sort of a fungal root issue. So when you take that plant out and you go like that, I'm going to apply. I'm not going to think that you're weird because you're doing this. Does it smell kind of earthy? Does it smell rich? Does it smell like what you think dirt should smell like? Or does it smell bad? And if it smells bad, stick it into the nose of one of the people that work there and say, does this smell bad to you? Do that. Don't be afraid. If you have pets or teenagers or children that you don't want eating your Daphne, which is actually a poisonous plant, or the oleander, which is a poisonous plant, they're not always poisonous. They're always poison, but they're not always, yeah, anyways. If you have a plant that you can't manage because you can't even get in there to pull the weeds around it or work around it, maybe that's not your plant. If you need a really sharp, pokey plant, and like I said, I have a ribes speciosum underneath my 14-year-old's window, just in case, because you never know. know what the plant does. Ask the people that you buy the plant from, is it a poison? Like, what happens if my dog eats this? Your dog probably isn't going to eat it. Usually these plants that we have with these toxins in it, they'll just make the dog vomit. There's very few plants out there that are going to kill your dog. There's very few dogs out there that are dumb enough to continue to eat the plant after it's made them throw up. They actually learn. So that's the good thing about some of these poisonous plants is there's like a level of toxicity, just like everything out there. Some plants are worse than others. Some bands are worse than others. I can sing the praises of mulch forever. There aren't a whole lot of downsides to using mulch, and most of these downsides to using mulch are things that we actually do once we put the mulch on the ground. It's going to keep the water where it's at. It's going to do something like this. It's going to keep the weeds down, so you're going to have to be out there digging less or spraying Roundup less. It's going to be a little bit more aesthetically nice, but really what it's going to do, it's going to help your plants. So this mulch that you put down, I always suggest the smallest size you can get your hands on. When you order it, ask for the smallest size that they have. Everybody's going to call it a different name, micro bark, pebble beach bark. There's all of these names for the smallest one that they have. The smaller it is, the tighter that they're going to pack together. The tighter that they pack together, the more light they're going to keep out, and the more water that they're going to keep in. So if you put down 3 inches of this really tightly packed mulch on top of an area that probably has weed seeds in there from years of just having weeds, you're going to have a lot less plant coming up through there that you don't necessarily want. And usually the ones that have to climb up through 3 inches of mulch are going to be really easy just to pop out of the ground. We'll get some do's and don'ts of mulch here, because the don'ts are kind of some of the things that I answer all the time. It's, don't push it up against the tree. Push it away from the tree. Give it a few 6 inches or so away from the tree so that the tree can actually breathe. And there's not a lot of terrible things that you can do to your trees except for mulching right up against it or adding too much extra soil around the trunk of the tree where it's actually breathing through still. People always want, the guy that did landscape cloth. If you've ever taken landscape cloth out of your yard, anybody ever taken landscape cloth out? So will you use it again? No, okay, yeah, that's why. You put this really nice impenetrable fabric down that the weeds can't go through. And it sounds like a brilliant idea, except when you put the mulch on top of that, what happens is this mulch breaks down. And it makes this really nice, it gets to the point where you can't even tell that it was mulch at one time. It looks more like soil, and it's a great substrate for weed seeds to grow in. And so now you've got them growing on top of your landscape fabric because they're growing inside your decomposed mulch. Once you get sick of that mulch and you try to pull it out, it just disintegrates. It's all over the place. If your landscaper tells you to use landscape cloth, tell them no. Just trust me. If there's anything, just trust me. I promise. Do you have questions about that? Answer them at the end. Right? If you just put mulch down over your lawn, that's not going to kill it, if you're curious. If that's like a thing that you have in your head that you want to do, don't do it. Get rid of the lawn first and then put the mulch down. We could have a whole 2-hour talk on just getting rid of your lawn, right, Don? Don't mix it into the soil. There's what they call a nitrogen draft. And this is when all of the soil microorganisms, these fungus, archaea, bacteria that have this whole soil interweb that's working down here, they perform best when they're using a lot of nitrogen. There isn't a lot of nitrogen as far as its organic compound in mulch. It's mostly carbon. So if you put this mulch and you mix it into your soil, what you're going to have is you're going to have this nitrogen draft where you have this big explosion of population of soil bacteria and soil fungus, and then it's just going to die out until you get more decomposable matter, more organic material that breaks down. So don't mix it into the soil. I don't think when I was growing up that I knew the difference between hay and straw. I didn't know, so I never used it in my yard, but use hay and don't use hay instead of straw. Use straw. Hay actually is full of weed seeds and all of that, and ask for it. It's easy to say the wrong thing when you go to the place to buy straw if you're going to use straw to cover your yard or keep the water down. So you can use that as a mulch. Plus straw is a heck of a lot, and it's lighter. Easier to lift. A couple of the do's, and when I say replenish, just put some more back there every year. You're going to put a lot less back, but you'll see it. If you put 3 inches down, it's going to take about a year for half of it to really start decomposing. So put a little bit back. When I say leave a little bit blank, there are these California native bees that nest in the ground, and they won't nest in the ground if it's just all bark. So find a nice hot sunny spot where these native bees can burrow nest. Yeah. Yes?
What did you mean by color paper and cardboard?
So that's in the lawn removal process. When you kill your lawn and when it's gone, put your cardboard down and put the mulch on the top of it. So cover it up with that. So that's going to help keep the weeds from coming up through there. Mainly, what we do mostly to our yards is maintain it. We mow it, and we prune it, and we clean it, and we rake it, and we do all of these things. What can you do to keep that maintenance schedule down? If you have a lawn, you can put it off for 2 or 3 weeks in the summertime if you want to. I usually can't get away with that long because it gets too big and I use a push mower and it doesn't cut through the grass after so long. So I have to be out there every week and a half to 2 weeks with the mower to actually keep the lawn from growing too much even without any water right now. Bugs are usually a big deal when it comes to maintenance. Your aphids on your roses, your aphids on insert plant here. You can keep that down if you're planting some of these plants that attract these beneficial insects. When I say beneficial, this is not just bees that do pollinating for your cherry tree or for your tomatoes. These are beneficial insects like predatory flies and parasitic wasps that will come in and actually take care of the bugs that are there. They'll parasitize the aphids, or they'll just eat the aphids where they're at. So having California native plants that attract California native beneficial insects is going to keep your bug population down, and it's going to reduce your maintenance. I literally have talked for 2 hours about pruning. So we're going to just touch that for a minute when we get there. Weeding is another thing that you're going to also be part of your maintenance schedule. That's going to be something that you have to do. The more mulch you use, that's something that you can also keep down. Spot watering to get those initial plants in the ground. You can just water that plant if you need to, or if you've got a regular schedule that you're running your drip system on, maybe what you need to do is you need to put a couple of extra emitters on this brand new plant, or you need to increase the size of the emitter on these plants so that you can get more water more frequently to this place that you just planted this brand new plant, or you take your shower water out there in a bucket and you just water that a couple of times a week. Crowded plants, don't be afraid to. I know that when we plant something and they're all small that we want to put more of them in, and I understand that, and I do that. But when they get to their full size and they're growing together, don't be afraid to take some out. You enjoyed them for a while, they're now starting to compete with each other, get rid of them. Pruning is it's an art form and it's a science, kind of all at the same sort of fusion level. You have to know what the plant's going to do before you cut it and after you cut it, how it's going to respond to what you do to the plant. That's what I would call a heading cut. Not necessarily all heading cuts are bad cuts, but when you're dealing with a tree, you can see where that was topped and then it sprouted from the sides, right? That's kind of obvious, and you see those two plants those two branches that are kind of coming up in that V shape over there. Almost all plants, in their trunk, they leave these, what they call like an epicormic bud or a latent bud. That's just asleep until something happens to this plant. When you cut it, they're going to respond. They're going to redistribute the auxins and the hormones in this plant, and the plant is going to do something. Usually, it's not going to do exactly what you want it to do if you're just topping your tree. Know the different type of plants that you have. If it's a herbaceous plant, which means that it's going to die away, it makes no solid hard wood every year, like a hellebore or some of these plants that die all the way down like a lily. they're going to die all the way back. It doesn't really matter how you prune those. You can prune them kind of any way you want because there's nothing left at the end of the year anyways. If this is a shrub that's going to be there long term, think about what its pruning needs are going to be and how they're going to be different from an annual plant that you're just going to pull out, or a herbaceous plant that's just going to die down. This is as quick and as easy and as brutal as I can make pruning. Underneath every single leaf of a plant, mostly, there is these buds, and they want to grow. The plant is not necessarily pushing them to grow. That's that bud right there, and that's on the outside of that plant. When you prune something, look for that leaf. Prune to above the leaf, and it'll grow from where you cut it to. When you shape a plant, see that bud that's on the outside. This is obviously, it looks like it's a rose. Those are roses right there. And they're really easy to prune when they're in the wintertime when they're asleep, because you can see exactly what the shape of that bush looks like. It's not always that easy with the manzanita or with a ceanothus. You actually have to think about that a little bit more and look at it a little bit more. But as far as pruning goes, if you're pruning to an outward facing bud, it's going to grow the direction that you tell it to grow. Mostly. Plants will do what they want. I mean, if they did everything that we wanted, I'd be out of a job too, because they would just do exactly what we told them to do. This is another big thing, or it used to be a really big thing. We used to have to tell people that they can start to do a little bit of drought-tolerant landscaping by hydrozoning their plants. I think all of our yards are going to be one big hydrozone that just is really drought-tolerant or really low water. So it's hard for me to say that you need to group your plants by hydrozone, because they're all probably going to be drought-tolerant plants here, or at least they should be. Down the road, these are the plants that we should be replacing our thirsty water plants with. Know that if you're using a drip system, that you can add and subtract and change the emitter size. They make so many different types of irrigation systems, sprinklers, heads, emitters, bubblers, shrublers, you name it. You want to do it, you can find it, and you can probably do it to your system that you have right now and just change kind of what you've got. You can put a drip system on your pop-up. You can put one on your hose bib that's coming from your house. You can make it happen that you just turn on your water at the hose bib, water your lawn for whatever it is for 2 hours, and turn off the water. Set your alarm so you don't forget. So when I say group plants by hydrozone, just start thinking more California native plants, more drought-tolerant plants. This is still things that you need. This is still important. These plants here, I will offer as many of these plants as I can possibly grow for you this fall. And I've got a passion for these plants that are really low water, that look really good for most of the year. So I will always kind of experiment with things that we grow. But I'll always plant them out in our landscape or in one of our gardens to actually test them out to see what they do. So when you're thinking drought tolerant, think about those areas of the world that are also having a similar climate to us. Hopefully they're also not in a drought like us, but that's where you buy your plants from, is from plants from those regions. I could talk California natives for another 2 hours, but I won't. They do attract these things that you want to see, these beneficial insects, these birds and the bees and all of this. They are going to do what you want to do. They're used to growing here. They've been here for a long time. Yes, if you buy a plant that only grows on the coast, that doesn't grow anywhere else, that needs that kind of that seashore conditions as far as its seasonality goes, maybe it's not going to work here. But there's some amazing plants from Catalina and the Santa Cruz Islands that do fantastic here in the Central Valley, California. For whatever reason, they do very well here. But take it plant by plant. My links aren't necessarily working, so I can't take you to the Plant Right website, which has a bunch of these invasive plants that you should watch out for. You're the one in charge of what you do. No one is out there actually telling you what to do with your yard. We're telling you to water less, but we're not telling you what to plant. You have choices. Know that what you put in is going to be there for hopefully a long time. Try to make that right choice about what's going to happen if I live on the North Davis Ditch and I plant a really weedy, spready plant, if it gets out into the ditch, it might go down river. I live in Sacramento. I walk our rivers. I walk our river trails, and I can see Vinca minor, and I can see English ivy, and I can see all of these things that are in our waterways that have escaped somebody's yard, and now we're in our naturalized systems, which we can debate that also, but we won't. But this is a big thing, is that a lot of times we don't, as horticulturalists and plant breeders and growers, we don't always know what's going on, and that this plant is going to, in Sacramento Valley, was going to escape and get into the waterways. We probably wouldn't have done that if we would have known. But once we do know, I stopped growing them. I stopped selling them. Scotch broom, I haven't, before I used to sell Scotch broom. I mean, it's, 12 years ago, it was a great yellow blooming plant. It was amazing. So we learn, we grow, we change, and that's not a bad thing. So check out that website there, or not that's not the website, but if you go to the Plant Right website, it is going to give you kind of this list of plants and some substitutions, and I'll give you a few of those. Mexican feathergrass, beautiful plant. Plant just one and you'll have enough to fill up your entire yard and some of your neighbors and the guy down the street. It's really seedy, it germinates really well, and it will literally look like this from one plant. So be careful what you buy. That's a great substitution. That's eyelash grass right there, or bouteloua, about the same size. I think it's actually cuter than that, but that's just me. There's a couple of things that maybe you should avoid and some things that you maybe should do. Some ground covers. There's an option. There is at least one other plant to take the place of that plant that you shouldn't buy. How about that? At least one. A lot of these aren't even in the industry anymore. You can't go to a nursery and buy pampas grass. You just can't do it. You can't buy highway ice plant anymore. So a lot of these things that are still on these lists are just like, really just don't do it. Or if you've got it, maybe get rid of it. So I won't dig into too much of the why you don't plant pests, because I think we kind of covered that a little bit. But know that there's always organizations and there's volunteer agencies and there's people and groups and societies all across California that are working every day. There's somebody that's removing some sort of an invasive plant from somewhere. So think about their time. And if you're a volunteer yourself somewhere, think about your time. We're getting kind of towards the end of this. In a good amount of time. I would like to answer questions. And when we get through questions, then we can look at plants. How about that? Does that sound good? Questions? Bring it on. I'm ready. Nothing? Go ahead.
Our landscape maintenance procedures for us here to do that just, a lot, and we have 60 households, and we're trying to convert a pretty big old landscape. And our maintenance company will give us free mulch. Shreddy, it's not bark because they don't do trees. But is that okay to use?
It's probably fine. There's a lot of different options that you can use for mulch. You can use bark, you can use tree bark, you can use straw, you can use just cardboard. You're just basically trying to keep the weeds down and the water in. So it all works. Know that when you get free mulch, sometimes there is a price tag with it. And that may be, if it's an old tree from somewhere else, there's a reason that they took it down, and it could be because it was diseased, and you could be getting some of that into your yard. I'm not saying that that's a prevalent problem, but just know that it's there and ask those questions. So you can use that on as a mulch, as leaf debris, leaf matter, shredded up, ground up, plant stuff. It's fine.
Further on mulch, about the cardboard, I need reassurance. So I have a few roses I want to keep. I watered the roses. I have big sheets of cardboard. I soak them in water and I put them down around the roses, not too close to the stem, whatever. It looks to me, and the cardboard is dried out. Now I wonder, when I water the roses, will the water ever get to them?
Well, you did the right thing and you kind of kept it away from it. I did the same thing with my camellias. I put cardboard around the camellia trees itself, and I'm dumping water into that open spot between it, it's okay to get your cardboard wet. You're going to want to get your...
I want to, but I just wonder, it's
It'll get...
on the sprinkler system, though, sprinkler will...
I promise it'll go down through there. You're reassured.
Thank you.
Good. Dawn, bring it on.
I was just going to throw something out there real quick. If you have a slope, I would advise not to put the straw or the shredded kind of mulch on there because it can cause storm. It can run into the storm drain system. So if you've got a pretty good slope to your front yard and it's not going to stay on the property so much, then just be careful with that. I mean, most areas, if it's flat enough, it's going to hold on, but we don't want to create any additional storm issues.
It's true. Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, two, if I can cheat, but one, what's the difference between part sun and part shade?
Okay.
And two, should we be fertilizing or feeding?
Thank you. So the difference, if I call something a part sun plant, that means it can handle mostly sun. If I call it a part shade plant, it means it can handle mostly shade. Or really, it's probably the same term, and each plant is going to be different. I call almost everything a part sun plant if it's a shade plant. But the term of it doesn't matter too much. As far as fertilizing, you should feed things. If they're new plants, I feed things. If they're old established plants that maybe look like they're lackluster, losing themselves, if they're fruit trees, I fertilize them as well. Some plants just need more fertilizer than other ones. Most of the time, established plants are getting everything that they need out of the soil as the soil microflora and fauna kind of work together and break down the organic compounds in your soil. So most of the time, you don't need to feed a lot of plants. It's not going to hurt them. Use some sort of a slow release or a time release fertilizer that's going to break down a little bit at a time versus just a liquid ready to use fertilizer, which is going to go really quick and get absorbed really quick, and then you're going to have to feed it shorter together, or shorter, smaller space between your feedings. Yeah, so you look for something that's going to break down slow. Okay, and that's all over the place.
When you say plant in the fall,
I don't even know anymore when the fall is. This is the problem. Is what I used to think is a fall is now like January 15th. So as far as when fall is I think of it more temperature-based versus rain-based, because it used to be we could all say plant in October and it was fine because it was raining by then. Planting in October is the reason that you're doing that, or late September, October, is because it's not nearly as hot during the day. You're not having to put nearly as much water down. The soil's still warm, and so the roots are really active and growing. So when I say fall, it usually starts in October. So that's a good time of year to actually think about doing. If you're going to do a whole landscape conversion, that's a great time to do it. If you're adding 1 or 2 plants in, I'd add 1 or 2 plants in right now to my existing landscape if I wanted to, because I'm watering it with shower water, so it's not going to be that big of a deal to manage that differently. But I wouldn't do more than just 1 or 2 plants during the summertime.
And that's because you have to give it more water.
Definitely.
It shouldn't be warm in the soil.
Well, warm in the soil is not too bad. That's the great thing about soil, is that it's a really nice regulator of temperature. You go down 6 inches and it's kind of the same degree, same temperature almost all year round. So planting in the fall just means that the soil is still warm from cooking all summer long. It stays warm for a while, good regulator. Go ahead.
Underneath some plants, other plants won't grow. Is there any kind of mulch that, besides disease mulch, but is there any kind of bark or stuff that's sold as mulch that is toxic to other plants that we shouldn't use?
I would. There's debate about what you should and shouldn't use for mulch. I haven't found anything that somebody is selling that is toxic to other plants. Even walnut mulch, it's not the same thing as walnut roots. Those are 2 different animals. There's no juglin released from walnut shells. So even if you're using that as a byproduct for a mulch, you're just fine. So I haven't heard of anything that's horribly toxic to new plants. If I hear some, I'll let you know. You had a question?
It's not kind of related, but.
That's okay. It can be about plants. Cars, I don't know anything about.
Watering trees,
Mhm.
The roots go way out. Are you supposed
they
to be
do.
watering like the whole diameter of the root system?
So it depends on what else is around there. I mean, if you're running your sprinklers anyways, you're not running your sprinklers, so you're just going out there with a hose, shower water, and you're watering this. So water in different places around where you're at. So if you're not, if you're putting it here, if your tree's here, water it there, there, here, and kind of hit and miss. So it's not all drying out, but it's not all staying wet. So the lawn's not, or grass that you're trying to kill also isn't coming back really good. It may start to grow a little bit and then run out of water again. So do it in different places and do it around the drip line. Closer to the tree is okay. Closer to the tree is not, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to the drip line and make sure you water every square inch of that all year long. So it'll handle it.
Is softened water okay? Softened shower water, is that okay?
It is okay. Dishwater, the last cycle of your rinse cycle on your washing machine is also just fine for plants. You guys have a different problem here than I have in Sacramento. I actually have decent water, and so I don't actually have to worry about all of this.
What's that?
This is Sacramento water, or maybe moonshine. I'll tell you later. When you have higher carbonates, higher calciums and magnesiums and sodiums in your water, you're going to see that. I mean, you already know it because you live here. It's not bad for plants. What's bad for plants is that planting plants that are not able to handle that. And so when you see these plants with these calcium burns or these what look like a chemical burn on the plant, that'd be part of the right plant, right place thing. And that's why we suggest a certain number of plants for you, is because those have all been tested here in Davis, and we know that they'll survive.
Well, I don't know, maybe you misunderstood.
Maybe I did.
I'm talking about the softened water that has the minerals replaced with sodium. I never use my
Okay.
water inside of my house plants.
Gotcha. Now I understand what you're saying.
Sodium.
Right.
So I wasn't sure if I could catch my shower water.
You can't. As far as I've never heard anything bad. There's this problem that's called like sodic soils. That means that there's a ton of sodium in your soil. Sodium is a natural part of chemical composition of your soil. So it's not going to be bad. You would have to use a heck of a lot of sodium to have actually a sodic soil issue, for sure. One in the back.
So just a reminder, next year is when we're going to start receiving Sacramento River water. So the salinity of our water, or basically because the components of our water is going to change. We're not going to need water softeners or anything anymore for our water. The water quality is going to be very different starting sometime next year.
In connection with that, it's possible to soften the water with a potassium salt instead of a sodium salt. I don't know to what extent. I mean, you're saying the sodium salt is not that much of a problem.
It's not a bigger problem, but the plants are going to like the potassium better anyways.
They would like
Sure.
So if you want to plant a tree where there was a tree and it was just cut off at the stumps don't seem to rot out.
It takes a long time for those things to break down.
What do you do?
Find a friend with a truck and a chain.
You pull out the old.
You have to, or you have to plant in a different spot. It's really hard to get those things out. That's why they stump grind down to, sometimes if you can get them to go down to 18 inches, they'll go down 18 inches, but there's still tree
Grinding
underneath there.
Speeds up the rotting, but it still takes a really long time.
Right. It's going to take a long time to decompose. I lived in a place for 10 years, and the same stump was there the whole time, and it didn't look any different, except for some fungal things. Weird.
Now, instead of using landscape cloth that you said on the dump part, what would you recommend using for a large area?
I would use just bark, if anything.
Just bark?
If I had one option, if I had one thing to use, it would just be mulch. If I wasn't going to put down any cardboard or any newspaper or any sort of cover, I would use bare dirt over a landscape cloth.
You would what?
I would leave my dirt bare. If that was my choices as landscape cloth or bare earth, I'd pull weeds.
What's wrong with landscape?
You're going to have weeds anyways.
Landscape?
Yeah, the weeds will grow on top of the landscape cloth, and they'll grow through the landscape cloth as well. It's true. I ask anybody that's ever had it, they'll tell you. You'll find out. Sorry. That's the honest truth, is that it doesn't stop weeds from growing on top of it.
So you just put dirt,
I'd rather leave it as dirt than put landscape cloth down myself. But given that case, buy mulch and put the mulch on top.
There is mulch on.
Right, there you go. That's good.
You might have already said this.
Maybe.
But is now the time to watch the sun?
Now is a great time to watch the sun because you're in this is as far as it will go.
Okay.
This is as far as it goes. That you've reached the most northern part where it's not poking forward anymore. It's actually on its way back now. So watch it this weekend. Hey, what are you doing this weekend? I'm watching the sun. Go ahead.
So if you have a space in your yard that is in the shade until like 2:30 in the afternoon and then it's full bore sun, would you plant a sun plant there?
I wouldn't plant a plant that needs full sun all day long there. I would plant a plant that's tolerant of getting shade all day long and then getting that sun. There's some out there. There's pelargoniums that can do that. There's asparagus ferns that can handle that sort of condition. There are some salvias that can handle that condition. So I wouldn't put a fruiting tree that needs full sun all day long in order to bloom. I wouldn't put a plant that I wouldn't put a lot of salvias there that need full sun to bloom all the time. There's plants that you can pick for that spot.
And there are plants that are labeled part sun. Is that what they're labeled?
I don't know.
Cooking something there.
Right.
Because it's also on a wall.
Right. So yeah, you don't. One thing you won't put there is a shade plant.
Right.
It'll be a full sun plant that you put there, or they can tolerate full sun, but it may not be a full sun necessary plant.
Gotcha. It has to be.
Come find me at the sale and I'll get you 3 of them, okay? I've got some, I promise. I've got that spot, I know. Go for it. You might be our last one.
I was just wondering your opinion on rock as mulch.
The weeds will still grow in it. I've got places where I've got rock and crabgrass. So it's not gonna do anything as far as keeping a lot of the moisture in. Doesn't do any carbon sequestration. It doesn't bloom. I'm a big bloom guy. You probably noticed that. That's just my opinion, is that I would rather use something else that's going to feed the plants. Rocks will break down, but just not in our lifetime, unless you're. So they will feed the plants eventually, but just not anytime soon. So if you use mulch, then that's actually going to be beneficial to the plants in a shorter term, for sure. So I have my email, all these plants, look at all those plants, yay, all those plants, woo! Okay. I sit down at my desk at least 3 times every week, whether I need to or not, and I'll get back to you if you email me questions. If you come out to the sales, I'd love to help you. It'd be great to see you out there. If you just buy from your local nurseries, that's awesome as well. Support them, they need it. These are our fall sell dates. Come check it out. Good luck.